If you listen to what I tell you and you do as I ask you to do training-wise, I said, I'll make you world champion in 6 months.
How's it going? Welcome. This is Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, episode 506 with Mr. Jack O'Halloran. My name is Jeremy Lesniak, show host, Whistlekick founder, and everything that we're doing over here at Whistlekick is in support of the traditional martial arts. If you want to know more about what we do, go to whistlekick.com. That's where you'll find everything we're doing. And one of the things you'll find there is our store. The code podcast15 is going to get you 15% off every single item in there. Everything for this show is on a whole different website, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. The show comes out twice a week, and the entire purpose behind this show, well, we're working hard to connect, educate, and entertain the traditional martial artists of the world. If you want to help the show, the work that we do, you can do quite a few things. Make a purchase, share an episode, follow us on social media, tell a friend, maybe pick up a book at Amazon, leave a review, or support the Patreon. Patreon.com/whistlekick, the place to go for that. You can support us with as little as $2 a month, but $5 and up gets you more stuff, more content. Sometimes we drop book drafts. The recent strength and conditioning program went out for free to everyone in the $25 a month tier. We try to deliver as much value as possible. If you're willing to spend your money with us, we're going to make sure you get as much as we can possibly deliver. You might not know today's guest as a martial artist, but he is. And he was a martial artist before quite a few of us were ever born. He has accomplished things few people ever have. And his name is mentioned alongside some of the greatest people in their fields. And we talk about them on today's episode. I can't think of how to introduce this and give you more without ruining some of these moments. So I'm not going to. I'm just going to encourage you to sit back and listen and be ready to maybe have your mind blown a little bit. I sure did. There we go. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing all right. It's a beautiful day. And in fact, when we're done talking, I think I'm going to get outside and go for a walk.
Well, I'm going to go out and get on my stationary bike and go for a bike ride.
Nice.
I have a bike in my backyard, so.
That's perfect. You get the best of both.
Yeah, it works out pretty well. Yeah. In between the rains here, we're having our rainy season, so.
Where are you?
I'm in Southern California.
Okay. I didn't know Southern California had a rainy season.
Well, we get periods where we have 3 or 4 days of rain. When it rains, you know. But,
yes, I have experienced that only once or twice, but yeah, it's pretty intense. I mean, whereas here I'm in Vermont, and we might have days of rain.
What part of Vermont are you in?
Montpelier.
I like Vermont. It's a pretty state. I love New England.
I was born in Maine, went to college in Massachusetts. I've lived in New England my whole life. I've done a lot of traveling, but there's something about it here. Something about the people.
Boston's like home to me. I lived in Boston for quite a few years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's...
in Rhode Island.
Yep.
I lived outside Providence, Rhode Island for a few years, but I have a lot of very dear friends in New England.
It's a great place. Boston's one of my favorite cities. It's easy for those of us born in New England to forget how much is going on in Boston.
Oh my God, it's changed so much though.
I'm sure.
Oh Lord.
I'm sure. When were you there?
I first moved up there in 1966. I've been there ever since.
For personal reasons, for work reasons.
I my boxing career.
Okay. Yeah, I mean it's quite the hotbed, or at least was.
My boxing career started in Philly, and then I got into a little bit of trouble, so they sent me to Boston. And when my whole life story, my father was a very prominent organized crime guy from New York. So I was very close to Raymond Patriarca in Rhode Island.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard. I have a few friends who have not been willing to go on record. They've witnessed things. They've heard things that there is a segment, and I'm going to be really careful the words I use because I know things that I'd rather not know. There is a cross section of martial arts in Rhode Island that has ties to organized crime.
Oh, the guy I learned my martial arts. There was a guy named Ronnie Dario, whose father was the banker for Raymond Patriarca. And Ronnie brought a master from China into Rhode Island back in the 60s, who was a direct descendant of Master Po.
Wow.
And he taught us, I learned Pa-kua from him. And I've been doing it for ever since. So I've been doing it for like 60 years.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
But
awesome.
it's, I mean, this guy was incredible. He was a little, he looked like a little Buddha. And I took a swing at this guy with a samurai sword, full strength. He caught it with 2 fingers.
No kidding.
Yeah. And he taught us the push exercise where you put hand to hand, back your hand, and he would touch the center of his palm, and he picked me right up off my feet and hurled me backwards about 20 yards.
Have you gotten to that point in your training? I haven't.
I got to a very good point in it
cool.
when I was younger, and Pa-kua, you defend from all angles, and it's a much better. I have a document that I'd love to share. I'll send it to you. It teaches
Please.
you, and it's from Master Po. It's from the 14th century, and it teaches you how to breathe, and the inner strength that you get from breathing, and it's an exercise that puts you at total relaxation, and when you do it on a daily basis, you get into the habit of doing it. Your body actually breathes itself, and it's the best rest period you'll ever get because your whole body goes down into a rest mode. It's kind of a neat deal because you breathe. You stick your tongue to the roof of your mouth and breathe up through your nose. And then you'll breathe with your stomach, and you use your chi. It feeds your chi, and you take more oxygen into your body. And then you let it out, and you you just keep doing it continuously, and you put your mind into a space of a place where you never had any conflict at all, a piece of tranquility, like a color or a place or a thing, and you focus on that, and you breathe and breathe and breathe, and you can actually feel the energy, negative energy, go right out of your body. And if you can see auras, which some people can, you'll see the green just leave out of your feet.
Wow. You've gone pretty deep on this stuff, it sounds like.
Yeah. I shared that with Bruce Lee because Bruce had his own type of meditation. And I took him even deeper.
All right. Please don't gloss over that. Let's.
Bruce was a good guy. He was a good friend.
When did you meet him?
Back in the 60s.
How'd that come about?
Oh, there was a guy down in Long Beach who had a school. In fact, it was where Bruce had that conflict with the people that when he broke his back, and he fought the guy again down in this guy's school down in Long Beach. And the guy was a stunt guy, and he's a martial art guy. And Bruce brought a whole new element of martial arts through this guy. And this old man, this master from Rhode Island, was invited to go to a show down there. And the guy, one of the people that he taught, tried to take advantage and wanted to show that he could hurt this master. What a mistake he made in front of a lot of people. And this old fella, just with 2 fingers, I watched him touch this guy in 4 different places and shatter his bones.
What was the crowd's response?
They knew the guy was being a bit of a dork. He actually tried to hurt this old man, and the guy looked at him like, "What do you think you're doing?" And because he thought they were just doing an exhibition, to enhance people's minds on the arts. And this guy was just one of those people that his ego got away with him. And he made a very bad mistake. He never made it again, I'll tell you that.
And Bruce Lee was at that event?
Bruce was there. Bruce could not believe what he saw. But he did believe it, because Bruce was a bit of in fact, that's what got him killed. Bruce was a bit of a renegade himself. and he took the arts. He wanted to teach everybody. And some of the old timers over there didn't want certain things taught to Americans.
Mm.
That's why we had this fellow we smuggled out of China. They tried to say something to him, but he was too much. He was very, very, very powerful guy, very high up guy. He was, and so humble. He was amazing. I loved him. He was terrific. He really was an amazing individual.
Mm.
He couldn't. I tell you something. This is true. This is true. It happened to me when he first came over. He didn't speak a lot of English. And when he was teaching us, you couldn't, I never spoke Chinese, but he laid his hand on my thigh and started talking to me, and I could understand what he was saying. Figured that one out.
I've experienced some pretty crazy stuff, so I'm the last person to be skeptical of something's possibility. But we might have some folks listening who are saying, "No, that didn't happen." How do you?
Oh, there's a lot of people that in fact, until you saw this guy in action, you would never believe if you told story. And I'll tell you something, how humble he was. When we brought him over, he wanted to go to work in a Chinese restaurant. He was a cook. He didn't want all the accolades and stuff. He was a very humble guy. He was actually amazing. Because we had a school with a lot of kids that wanted to, but he took just a certain amount of people, and he was very guarded in what he did. And if you had to really be into what he was talking about, or he wouldn't be bothered with you. If you were doing it just to be a tough guy in the street or something of that nature, and he knew, he was incredible. The guy was really a trip. But he taught me balance. He taught me, that the body can endure an amazing amount of things, and the strength that you can put a solid strength in your bones and everything. You could get hit with. You could hit me with a bat when I was a kid, and you couldn't hurt my legs and stuff.
How long did you get to train with him?
Every day. Well, we did it for probably 6 to 10 years.
Wow,
something like that.
Now, is this? We've bounced around a little bit. So this was before or after the boxing?
This was right as I was into my fighting. I just got into boxing.
So I would imagine that there was a lot of carryover in what you were learning into the ring, right?
Yeah. I had a certain discipline that was amazing. It taught me discipline in life. And as crazy as I was when I was a kid, because you got to understand, my father was one of the most powerful men in New York. He was, my father was the head of Murder Incorporated. Mm. And he was the Gambino family. It was the Anastasia family. My father was Albert Anastasia. In fact, I've written a book where we're getting ready to make a movie.
Wow.
And we're going to do a series and tell the truth about a lot of things.
And now forgive my ignorance.
Yeah.
Are there people who would be upset with you telling those stories and making a movie of it?
Well, on my side of the street, they want it told. We're tired of all the lies and the bad slant that's been given to organized crime. And one of the amazing things about the film industry is that one genre of movie, nobody has a crystal ball as to what's going to happen in the movie business, but the one genre that has never lost money is organized crime pictures. And they tell so many, Hollywood takes liberties, and they slant things towards the Italian mafia, so-called mafia. And I'm a believer. I live under a code of omerta, and I've lived all my life that way. And what we are telling the story of how, from the very beginning, that the government and industry and organized crime and unions were partners for a lot of years. They created a lot of jobs. My father ran all the waterfronts. In The Godfather, when Brando was approached to do the drug business, and he said no, because if we touch it, our children will touch it. It'll be the downfall of the families. That's what my father said. So they assassinated him in 57 and then came back to me because I was 14 years old. And they told me a year later it was the worst mistake they ever made because he was the glue that kept things together. And he just didn't. Genovese was into the drug business, and because there was so much money and stuff involved, and greed and everything, and it was just as my father said, that if you touch that stuff, you're going to use it, and if you use it, it's going to create a vacuum of downfall within the families, and it did do that.
Wow. I think this is the first time we've had an episode where 15 minutes in, I've got about 12 different directions that we could go. And I'm not sure where to go because it's all interrelated.
Well, you live in New England, okay? Yeah. And New England is totally controlled by La Familia. Raymond Patriarca was a powerhouse. Out in Springfield, there was a very powerful man in Springfield, Massachusetts. And in fact, we used to have a home up in New Hampshire, and one in Vermont, and one in Maine. I fought a lot of fights in Maine that are not on record. I did a lot of smoker fights up there, and because Sam Silverman and the old man in Boston were promoters, and they promoted all over the place up there. They had little shows everywhere. So it was an interesting time.
That sounds like the biggest understatement I've ever heard.
But Rhode Island was, Raymond Patriarca was a powerhouse. You could do nothing in Rhode Island without him. Nobody could do anything in that state without him. And they controlled Massachusetts, and they controlled New England. And still do in actuality, in a lot of ways.
Why boxing?
I was playing pro football, and I was down in Philadelphia, and it was an era. I had left school early, so it was an era where you couldn't play professional football unless your class graduated. They didn't have what they do today, have hardship cases where kids come out as a freshman and go right into pro ball and all that stuff. They didn't have that then, and so you had to wait till your class graduated. So I was grabbed by the New York Jets, and because I had a lot of ability, and they had similar to baseball's farm teams. They had a semi-pro league on the East Coast that a lot of us played in until we were ready to go up and play time frame wise. And when it came time for me to play in New York, Philadelphia had a lot of friends of mine playing down there, and they had a great team, Jesus. And Jerry Wallman had just bought the team, was a new owner. And I said to Eubank, I wanted to go down and play. And he said, well, so they let me go and said I had a home if I wanted to come back to New York. And I went down to Philly, and they hired this guy, Joe Kuharich, which was a terrible coach. And he traded a championship football team away in 2 months. And Al Lee had just won the title. And I said to some friends of mine who were organized crime guys who ran boxing, and I said, I can beat that guy. So the next thing I know, I wound up in the gym.
You said you could beat Muhammad Ali. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did you mean it?
I could beat him. Huh?
Did you mean it? Or were you just looking for attention?
It.
Okay.
No, I absolutely meant it.
That's a bold statement, even in hindsight.
I was a tough kid. I was a tough kid in the street. I am. So I could never, because you couldn't box amateur because I was already considered a pro. Well, today you could do that, but you couldn't in those days. And I started. I just had. I'm one of 10 heavyweights who was a ranked world fighter and never boxed amateur. My amateur fights were in the street.
Sure. So how far were you able to take boxing?
Well, Ali and I were signed 4 times to fight. I was a world ranked fighter. I'm in several Hall of Fames. I fought some pretty good fighters. But the problem is I got into, I think it was after my 16th, I was undefeated the first 15 or 16 fights. And then they discovered I had a disease called acromegalia, which is a tumor of the pituitary gland. And I shouldn't be boxing at all. They couldn't figure out how, because it caused such depression. They said, how do you ever get up to get into the ring? How do you do that? And you shouldn't be doing it. And I said, yeah, that's the hell with that. And because I like fighting. You know, it was a great excuse for me to move around different places. I could take care of my street business, you know, without cover. I've been involved with people for a lot of years, and I'm one of the few people that never went to jail. Only for weekends.
What do you attribute that to? How did you stay out?
A little bit smarter than the average bear. I had some pretty good teachers, Meyer Lansky and some people. And I never lived in one place long enough. I was always moving around. You know, it's a problem. I have friends of mine in New England that done 30, 40 years in prison. Some of them died in prison. And it's because they would never say anything. They lived under a code of omerta, and they just never would talk. So but they wouldn't leave certain neighborhoods. So it was easy for the FBI to get them for, you know, conspiracy and stuff. And, you know, they put certain laws into place, which, you know, if you were talking to somebody and that somebody did some crime, you could be attached to it. So I never hung my hat on a corner that said that I belonged to this fashion of this and that. You know, I moved around a lot.
Was that conscious, or was that just your nature?
Pardon?
Was that a conscious decision to move around to avoid getting picked up, or was that just you were a bit of a rolling
combination.
Stone? Okay.
It was a combination. You know, I lived in Europe for like 20 years.
What'd you do over there?
I was in the movie business. And I married a woman who was the heiress of Shell Oil. So I really didn't have to do anything if I didn't want to, but it was a great way to stay out of sight, out of mind.
How'd you get into movies?
Then we had a lot of things going in Europe. We ran gambling in Germany, and friends of mine from Italy, and I stayed busy.
It's I think of all the things that I'm hearing, one thing I would never imagine anyone to accuse you of would be not being busy, of getting bored. I wouldn't imagine that boredom is something that suits you. How'd you get into movies?
They came to me actually when I moved up to Boston, and I was fighting out of Boston. Steve McQueen did the Thomas Crown Affair in 1966 up there. And when he came into Boston, we looked after him to make sure nobody bothered him. And he was such a good kid, man. You know, and he said to me, "Oh, you got to come down on the set. I want to put you in the movie with me." He and I became very good friends. And he said, "Man, you gotta come to Hollywood. You know, we'll have a ball." But bang, but bang. He was a crazy guy. And I just said, "I don't think that's for me, man. It's you and I are good friends." So I turned him down, and then I knocked the guy out in Los Angeles, Manuel Ramos, who was ranked number 2 in the world and ready to fight Muhammad Ali. And I had just show you how kind of crazy I was. I took a fight in South Africa to get off. I had to get out of the country for a while because we had some union indictments coming down. So I took a fight in South Africa, and I stayed down there for a month, and they wanted me to move down there to box out of South Africa. And I said, I don't think so. I mulled it around, and I got in great shape because I was doing nothing but concentrating on boxing. So I fought a kid in South Africa, and then 10 days later, I fought Manuel Ramos in LA, and I was in brilliant condition. And I knocked this guy out in the 7th round. And they came to me to do a picture called The Great White Hope. And Raymond had put the deal together. I never knew it until I got to Fox. They flew me out, and I was supposed to just walk in and sign a contract with this producer. And the guy was talking, rambling on, and I said, I don't think this is for me. He said, "No, you were supposed to just sign the contract. We want you to go to Spain for 6 months, blah, blah, blah." This was the biggest movie in Hollywood, James Earl Jones. And it was a boxing movie, so they wanted me to play Jess Willard. And I said, and I gave him a guy up in Minneapolis who had just retired. He was a big, tall kid, Jim Beatty. I said, "He's got 6 mouths to feed. He needs a job. You should call him on the phone." And the guy was amazed. You're turning us down? I said, well, I said, if you look at it that way, I guess so. And I left, and Eddie Foy Jr. was put the thing together. He was a heavyweight at Fox. And he said, oh, my God, you're going to get us in so much trouble. You're supposed to do this movie. They want you off the street so you don't get in trouble. I said, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. And and I was leaving Fox, and James Earl Jones was coming to show you how things go around quickly. James Earl Jones grabbed me and he said, you're Jack O'Hauer. And I said, yeah, you're James Earl Jones. He said, is it true what I just heard about you? I said, I don't know. What'd you hear? He said, you just told Hollywood to take the biggest movie out here and stick it? And I said, well, if you want to look at it that way, I guess. He said, I got to shake your hand. I never met anybody that did that before. And we became friends. And McQueen called me on the phone. What are you doing, you crazy man? He said, are you nuts? And I said, yeah, it's just not, I'm not ready yet. Because I was looking to fight for the title. I just knocked out the number 2 heavyweight in the world. And I settled it with Raymond and stuff. And so when I retired from boxing, they came to me to do a picture, Farewell, My Lovely, with Robert Mitchum. And I said, I think it's time. And I went to Hollywood. I met the director in New York, and they flew me out to Hollywood to do a screen test. And Mitchum saw the screen test. He said, it's either him or I don't do the movie. And we became very, very good friends. And he really was a mentor, and he taught me a lot about the industry and everything. And so I blame it all on Robert Mitchum.
I want to go back. I want to go way, way back and talk about your childhood, because you're talking about a lot of different interests. I mean, you're obviously we're not talking about all these things happening across 6 or 12 months, but it really seems like you could get plopped down anywhere in the world doing anything, and you would find your place there. And
Pretty
I'm
much
guessing that started somehow back in your childhood.
Yeah, well, it actually did. I started working when I was like 5 years old, pulling orders at a supermarket. I had these 4 little old ladies that lived in my neighborhood, and the store was only a block away from my house. So I had my wagon, and I used to go up on a Saturday, and I would take their orders to their house, and I get like a quarter or 50 cents or something, piece. And so I made $1 or something like that. And that was a big deal. And I never, I was always, I hustled all the time working. I delivered newspapers. In the summertime, I worked I sold papers on the beach, and then I bust dishes at night. And, I had working papers when I was 13. I had papers saying I was 16, and I was a big kid. And I did a lot. We spent every summer in Wildwood, New Jersey. And I worked a couple jobs. One summer I was 14 years old. I had this great paper thing. I was selling newspapers in the morning on the beach, and bussing dishes in the afternoon. And at night I set pins in a bowling alley before they had automatic pin setters. So I learned business, and learned how to survive on my own. I didn't need anything from anybody but myself. It was up to me.
What did your father think of this?
Well, my father, I only met once. I was raised by my mother. I was a love child. My father was, in 1940s, they were looking for Albert everywhere, and he was in the Army in Indiana Gap, Pennsylvania, teaching soldiers how to be longshoremen. He was a sergeant, but he never spent a night in the Army platoon. And he was in Philadelphia every night, and he met my mother. My mother made Jane Russell look like a boy, and I was a love child. I was born in 1943. Okay. And
what did your mother think of this work ethic?
Well, she was the one that taught me, to be an independent person. She knew, who Albert was. I never knew until I met him once before he died, and I was about to sit down and really get introduced to him. But he left me like 300 pages of written stuff that was very amazing. And he was an amazing individual. And the name O'Halloran was, my mother was married to a guy named Paul Halloran, and so he was away in World War II, and my mother worked all the time, and she was a gorgeous woman, and she was a singer, and she met Albert at a club in Philadelphia, and I was a product of it, and he always looked after me. There were people around me. When I was a kid, people teaching me things that was quite amazing. I had a guy who was an Irish guy, and it's in my book. His brother was the famous general of the IRA in Ireland, and he was an engineer for General Electric, and he was the IRA down at the docks in Philadelphia, so he was very close to my father. And he came, and every day he would be around me, teaching me different ways of compartmentalizing my mind. He taught me martial arts. He was the first guy that ever got me into judo and stuff like that. Taught me how to defend myself and taught me weapons. And I did a lot of crazy stuff with him when I was a kid. And he gave me a lot of discipline. He showed me a lot of discipline. So I had that in my life, and when I met my father, and he assassinated him in 14. I was 14 years old, and then I had to sit down with Meyer Lansky and some people, and they sort of took me under wing, and I learned a lot of very valuable things, that were very advantageous to my life.
Wow.
I use sports as like a mirror in front. I learned how to compartmentalize my life. This guy Rip Collins was an amazing individual. He taught me how to. I could sit when I was a kid. I was only like 10 years old. I could sit and I could listen to the radio, watch television, read a book, and listen to a conversation being spoken in another room, and be alert on all four of those elements, and not miss a word or a trick of it. And he taught me a puzzle. I put 50 objects, list 50 objects, and it gave me 2 minutes to go down the list and read it. And then he would ask me a number, I give him the object. He'd say the object, I give him the number, because I learned how to put a puzzle in my head. And that's how I learned how to compartmentalize things, so that I never got hung up on this or that, and I could, control my emotions. If that makes any sense to you.
It does. It does. It's impressive. It's not something I can do, but it's certainly impressive. I wanted to.
So I learned that as a young child,
Yeah.
and I carried it through my life.
When you stepped into acting, and I'm not an actor. I've never been an actor. We've had a number of actors on the show, and I've listened to interviews with actors, and it's something that I find very interesting. And one of the things I find interesting about acting is the ability to draw on experience. And it doesn't sound like, from our already pretty brief conversation, I'm sure there's you talked about a book, and we'll talk about the book in a minute. I'm sure if we went back and filled in gaps, the experience that you had to draw on is quite vast, and I would imagine that any role you would play, you'd have 3 or 4 choices of people to model or experiences.
That's where Mitchum was so instrumental in my acting, and he knew about me more than I thought he knew. And when the very first day I ever went to work, he arranged they picked him up, then they came and picked me up, and we had to drive downtown LA. I don't know if you've ever seen Farewell My Lovely. If you haven't, you should. It's a great film. And he arranged for them to pick me up, and so I had only met him once at a fight, at a boxing match, so I didn't really know him per se, but the hotel called me and they said, "Well, your driver's here." It was like 7 o'clock in the morning. And so I go skipping down into the lobby, and there's Mitchum hanging against the wall with dark glasses, and he's standing with his foot against the wall. And I come into the lobby, and they didn't realize even who he was. And he said to me, "Oh, this is supposed to be Jackie O." And I said, so we hit it off right off the get-go, and we got in the car, and he kept me laughing all the way down to the set. And then we got out of the car, and I went to get dressed for the deal, and we went to go do the very first shot I ever was going to do in the business. And he said to me, "Have you read that script, kid?" And I said, "Read it." I said, "I know your role, my role, Charlotte Rampling's role. I know it from cover to." He said, "Good. Throw it in the trash can." I said, "What?" He said, "Throw it in the trash can, and don't let me catch you doing what thousands of people in this town do, acting. Just be yourself. Take yourself, put yourself into this character, and walk down the street like it's you. You've been there, kid. I know who you are." And I was playing this hooligan, so and I said, "Wow, this is a cakewalk." And that's exactly what I did, and I from the very first moment, he taught me the camera. He taught me, not to worry about this and not to worry about that, and to look. And he taught me things that were valuable, like look straight through the camera. Don't look at the camera. Let it find you, because the camera's going to love you. And it worked very well, And Farewell turned out extremely well. In fact, had I not been so, I had just come off the streets, man, and the Johnny Carson wanted me to do. Robert set it up. The movie came out very, very well, and they wanted me. They thought I could get nominated for supporting actor that year. And Robert set up a meeting with me and Johnny Carson in the Polo Lounge, and I went to sit down with Johnny Carson, and we had a conversation. And it dawned on me. I said, "Your show is live, correct?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "I don't think I can do it." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, I know Mitchum's told you a lot about me, and I'm going to come on your stage, and you're going to ask me about my father, and I'm going to ask you where the men's room's at." He said, "What, you won't talk about your father?" I said, No, I won't. And I won't talk about that side of my life. And he said, "Well, we'll arrange the questions, though we won't ask those questions." And I said, "John, no disrespect, but you're the investigative reporter on television in this whole country, and you have Albert Anastasia's son on your stage, and you're not going to ask me about my father? I mean, do I look like I fell off a turnip truck? I appreciate the offer." I said, "I really do, but I think I have to give it a pass." And Mitchum called me on the phone. He said, "What, are you crazy?" He said, "What's the matter with you?" He said, "This is Hollywood." He said, they love that." I said, I just couldn't get my head around. You understand?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well,
Exposing
as much as I
certain
can.
things. I couldn't get my head around exposing certain things about my life on open television. You understand? But I was like a phantom. You see me here, you see me there, you see me nowhere.
But that's
I could
changed.
disappear in a crowd very easy. As big as I was, I could just melt away.
I'm curious why that changed. I mean, you went from giving up some pretty substantial opportunity to now not just talking about it, but promoting it, writing a book about it, and trying to set the record straight.
I saw so many changes. John Gotti was a foolish man, and a lot of people, they changed. They got into this drug business and stuff, and they forgot how to make money. And I didn't like where it was going, so I got more attached to people in Italy, and stayed more in gaming and stuff of that nature. And acting then became what the sad part was that I would not do a lot of publicity, even with Superman. I didn't go all over the world like Sarah and Terrence did and stuff. I knew what I could do on screen, and what I did on screen stood out, and it was very much acknowledged, and I became an iconic actor. And I don't know. I just never ran down the street with the publicity like a lot of actors do, you know.
Mm.
And I just every picture I did well, and I've gotten accolades for everything I've ever done. So
Talk about Superman.
Superman was I was doing a picture in Spain with Gene Hackman called March or Die, and they came and asked if I would go up to London and meet with Richard Donner. And Hackman and I flew up there together. And Donner and I sat down and had a conversation about the character Non. And he said, you know, how do you feel about playing a guy who's a mute? And I said, you know, I would embrace doing that. And he said, what? I said, I would embrace doing it. I said, because Jackie Gleason's a friend of mine, and he did a picture called Gigo, and he won an Oscar for playing a deaf, dumb mute. And I would love the opportunity. And I said, and you know, you've got, and I had read the script, and I said, you know, you've got three villains, and Non was a genius scientist that they lobotomized. So, but he was this huge brute of a man. I said, and you have Terrence Stamp is a vicious general, and Sarah is a man eater. So somebody has to relate to the child audience, and there's going to be a huge child audience for this movie. So I'm going to take this big brutish guy, and I'm going to play him like a child, learning how to walk and talk, and use his eyes and all that stuff, and act like a child. And it worked very well, actually. It came off pretty good. And I've had people, you know, when I first started doing Comic-Con, people would come up to me and say, my God, I was so scared when I saw Non, but I loved the character because it related to children, you know. So it came off pretty well, worked out pretty well. I mean, I don't know, what'd you think?
It worked very well. Yeah.
You know, so I became an iconic actor from it. You know, I enjoyed doing the film. We all did. It was a great movie. We had a great cast. It was sad that they didn't let Donner continue, because he would have done 3, 4, 5, and 6. Would have been a different franchise. But that's the greed of the Salkinds. You know, that's another thing that went a different direction.
Sure. These stories are great, and I'm loving it. I'm not. I don't want to change anything, but I want to bring some martial art thread into it.
Sure.
Because, you know, you've talked about discipline, you've talked about obviously the physical components of your martial arts training, you talked about judo, you talked about boxing, and I include boxing as a martial art. Not everyone does, but I do, and it's my show, so we're gonna throw them in there. And I'm curious because, you know, when we have guests on who have done some acting, whether that's stunt work or in front of the camera, you know, character work, one of the things I find really interesting is how their time as a martial artist enhanced or changed the way that they acted. So I'm wondering,
Well,
did that?
I tell you, I'll give you a good story.
Please.
When I retired from boxing, and I was in the acting business, and I went to the gym every day because I love working out. You know what I mean? And they sent a kid from Detroit. He was in the Kronk gym. And they sent him to L.A. because he thought he was a southpaw and he was boring, but he was undefeated. And they sent him out to the Goosen gym where I was working out at. And I helped a lot of kids in the Goosen gym. Michael Nunn, I helped a lot. And they sent this young man out, and I watched him train, and I grabbed him and I sat him down, and I said, you know, if you listen to what I tell you and you do as I ask you to do training wise, I said, I'll make you world champion in 6 months. And he said, wow. So I moved him in my house, and I put him into a training regime like I would with martial arts. And I taught him how to breathe, and I got him in the best condition he ever got in his life. I took his body fat down to 8%. And I made him, and I created Frankie Lyles. And Frankie Lyles became the super middleweight champion of the world and defended his title for several years. And it also started Freddie Roach, who's now one of the premier trainers in the world. Trains Pa-kua, and he started out with Frankie. And I showed him. I taught Frankie how to move side to side, step, and I taught him how to instill martial arts into his boxing ability, and created a relaxation in him, and he went right down the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of contenders, and just beat them all. He was a very skilled fighter.
I'm not as much of a historian of boxing as would be great for this conversation, but from what I do know, it sounds like what you're talking about, this training regimen, was not typical of the time.
No, it wasn't.
What inspired you to not only give that a whirl, but to be so confident? I mean, you
tell you why
this guy's 6 months.
I'll tell you why I did it, because I knew the ability that I had that I didn't do. I didn't donate myself and put myself into boxing what I should have put into it, and I got away with it because I was a tough kid. So I wanted to show that the knowledge that I had, I could give to somebody, and that it was teachable. You understand that you could teach other people to do this.
Yeah.
And I did that, and I proved the point to myself. And I never walked around and got big accolades for it or wanted to go on television and all that stuff. That wasn't what I did it for. I took him to the title. He won the title. He beat Michael Nunn. He beat Cellier. He beat all the top contenders, and he beat him handedly. So, and then one day he got too full of himself and thought he could do this by himself, and I walked away. And that's when he first lost.
It's amazing how many careers ego has claimed.
Well, that's sad. You're right, and it's all it is ego. When you take somebody to a threshold and they think that they're invulnerable, but they don't remember how they got there. And one of the treats of martial arts is humility. And if you don't have humility, you're never going to master any martial art, ever. I don't care how good you think you are. I mean, when I did a movie, Hero in the Terror with Chuck Norris, and Chuck and I used to have long discussions. And Chuck was very good at martial arts, but he was never Bruce Lee.
What do you mean by that?
Bruce lived, eat, and slept his art. He was a believer in it. He created a whole new principle. He wrote a whole new theory out. And he lived it every day and every moment of his life. He didn't use it as a step forward in society. He went to China to do all those movies because they jerked his chain with the Michael Carradine. That was his character. He was supposed to play that guy.
Yeah, we've talked a bit about that on this show.
And he was very angry, but he went over to China and he did all those, and then he wouldn't do movies here again. He was a kind of a crazy kid. He would go down into neighborhoods and knowing that people were going to try to mug him. And he would take guns off of guys and everything. And I told him, I said, Bruce, you can't do that kind of stuff, man, because these kids will shoot you. And he said, they ain't fast enough. They're not quick enough. They can't, and they killed him with a mental deal. If people don't believe that these people have abilities of entering your head, then they're mistaken, because they do. And they put a bubble in his head and caused an aneurysm in him. That's what killed him, because he wouldn't stop doing what he was doing.
Hmm. And you're referring to teaching non-Chinese.
Yeah. And that part when they did his life story, that part's very true. He had that conflict with the elders. And there's some people over there that guard this stuff. They don't want certain things let out. And it's like, people watch movies and they see people disappear, in front of stuff. Well, they actually have an ability to do something, and it's every person's eye has a blind spot. You understand? And the Oriental mind, for some reason, has the ability to focus and catch that. And these ninjas used to disappear right in front of you because your blind spot would, and they'd move. And they weren't there when people got very confused on that, and it was because it was a reality that they could do it. But they had the ability to leap up into a tree, or they had things in the ground that they already had planted there to disappear in front of your eyeballs, to baffle you. You understand?
Yeah.
And I knew a couple ninjas that were very, very clever guys. Boy, I mean, there's I knew a guy who lived up in, and they couldn't live in society because there's too much negativity. These guys are so positive thinking, and they're so pure in the movements of their bodies and the conditioning and the way they eat and the way they live. So they live in the woods, and they live in places where there's not a lot of people around. That's why they lived in these compounds like the Shaolin monks and stuff. And some of those purists, boy, they can do amazing things, boy. I mean, I've seen them do some things that you would just shake your head at and say, whoa, how does human body do that? But it is possible because it's mind over matter.
You've told some
how much ability of control you want, huh?
You've told some pretty incredible things already. I'm wondering if you might be more specific. I think anybody who's made it this deep into the episode, into our conversation, has suspended some disbelief. So if you wouldn't mind indulging me.
Well, it's a matter of how much you want your mind to be free, how much you want to believe in you, how much you want to understand that if you put a discipline in, and it's a discipline, there's no two ways about that. What you put in your body, I'll give you a good example. When I was asked into the service, I didn't want to go during the Vietnam deal. I went into a special forces thing, and it was either that or go to jail. And I went and spent time with this ninja guy that I knew from Washington, the state of Washington, and he said, let me tell you why soldiers in Vietnam and places like where there's heat and stuff, why they get in trouble and why they get caught. It's because of their diet, and they sweat, and they stink that comes out of their sweat that they don't smell. Other people have the ability to smell you a mile away. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no. So I ate certain foods and put it into my system and stopped eating meat and stopped eating, and I ate things that the same people that they ate over there. And there was a snake in Vietnam called the hook snake that would kill you if it bit you and you didn't have a needle to stick in your arm with the repellent for it, you were dead. And it killed a lot of people. So and it happened if you're in the jungle, it's one of those little things that crawl in your boot or something. And so I took poison, snake venom, a little bit a day for a 2-week period, and built my immune system up. Got sick as a dog the first week, but it built my immune system up. So if that snake ever bit me, I was not going to die. But you have to discipline yourself to do things like that. And it's how much you want or how much you care about your life. What length are you willing to go to protect you as an individual? how much of yourself are you willing to give? Or do you just want to read something or listen to a man teach you something and take what you feel you want to take and then put a limitation on yourself when there is no limitation if you don't want it? Does that make any sense to you?
It does, and it sounds like the common thread through everything you've talked about that you've done. I'm going to guess that even now, that if someone posed a challenge to you, if you wanted to tackle it, you would believe that you could tackle it and succeed.
You just do it. That's you take it apart and you do it. It's.
Is there anything you're
I
working
have a
on?
script. I have a script that I wrote 40 years ago, and it was an Oscar-winning film John Ford did called The Informer. Victor McLaglen won an Oscar, won 4 Oscars the picture. And when I first got into business, and I didn't have an agent until after Farewell My Lovely came out, and I got an agent, and the guy sat me down. He said, "Well, what is it you want to achieve, and where do you want to go?" And I said, I like the Victor McLaglen tread, what he did, the kind of pictures he did. And he said, they don't do movies like that anymore. I said, well, I'll redo The Informer. And he said, wait a minute. He said, you're not an actor 6 months and now you're going to be a writer producer? And I said, yeah. So I got a hold of Liam O'Flaherty, who wrote a book called The Informer that they made the movie out of. And he lived in England at the time. And I went to see him, and he sat down with him, and he told me where the characters came from in his book and everything. And then I sat down with Robert Mitchum, and I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, my advice is go to a library, get 10 or 12 scripts that are Oscar-winning scripts, and look at the format, read them, and learn how they put them together. And I did that, and I wrote a script, and I've turned down several deals for it because I didn't like the way the studio was going to control it. So we're now getting into a mode. I'm going to do the film as soon as all this stuff lets up. We're getting ready to go to Ireland and do it.
The script that you're talking about, this expose is not the right word, but this sharing of truth. These stories. That's what you've been holding on to for 40 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I could do it right. And it's in my Oscar, and I'll win an Oscar for it. I will win the Oscar.
It reminds me of, if you know the story behind Avatar.
Yeah.
And all of Cameron's work on that, and waiting, and for the audience, if you haven't looked into this, you might want to, that the original ideas came right around the time of Star Wars. And it wasn't until 3D was really viable that he moved forward with that picture, because he wanted to tell it right, just as you're talking about. You wanted to make sure the story was told the right way.
Exactly, correct. And timing has a lot to do with it, and the cast and stuff like that. And like the music I've already done. I wrote a song for the script back in the '80s. I was getting ready to do it. And I wrote a song called Simple Man that Elton John recorded. You look up Elton John's recordings, you'll find a song called Simple Man. Well, I was the kid that wrote that, and his writer was a good friend of mine. So we were sitting down one day, and I said, I want to put music to this film, and I created a song called Ballad of a Simple Man. And he said, I'm going to take this to Elton. Do you mind? I said, no. So his name is on it, and he got the credit for it, but I didn't care. It didn't make no difference to me, because when I was going to do the film, I'd have went to Elton and we got the permission to do it, and because it fits the script to a T. The song is about Frankie McPhillips.
Oh.
And it's so the music's already done. So you got, and the guy is a pretty prominent guy that recorded it, So you just so I put pieces to puzzles together like that.
I see that, and you're not afraid to play the long game.
No, patience is a virtue.
It is. Martial arts movies, it's kind of the intersection of if we were to kind of take all the things we've talked about today, we'd be talking about martial arts movies. And, it's funny when we have actor guests on this show, they're either really passionate about martial arts movies or they're really, really not. It doesn't seem to be much middle ground. And I'm curious if you'll either be the first person to break that dichotomy or if you fall into one of the two
Well, I'll give you a
extremes.
funny story. Back in the 60s, when martial arts was becoming a big deal in America, and they were opening up these schools everywhere for teaching kung fu, which is a very raw martial art because it's very forward, and aggressive, So there was a guy from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, who had a couple schools over there, and he wanted to prove, like you like the interface boxing and martial arts, and he wanted to prove that how martial arts was so much better than boxing, and how it could be implemented. And there was a champion by the name of Joey Giardello. Look him up. He was a middleweight champion of the world, and a very, very good fighter. And we were sitting in a restaurant one day in Cherry Hill, and this guy came up to Giardello and he said, "I would like to challenge you in a gym and show you that how martial arts could prevail over boxing." And Joey looked at him. He said, "Are you joking, right?" He said, "No, no, no." He said, "I would really like to get in a ring with you." So Joey's in a suit. And he just got done doing some kind of an interview with some people. And he said, "Okay, let's go." The guy said, "What, right now?" He said, "Yeah, come on. Let's go. Let's go over to the gym in South Philadelphia." And we went over to the gym in South Philly. And Joey took off his coat and his shirt and got a pair of boxing shoes and put them on and didn't even change his pants. He got in the ring. And this guy, thought he was going to display this wonderful talent of coming straight forward at Giardello. And Joey, being a very clever boxer, took a half step to the left, hit him with a left hook, and knocked him out. And walked out of the ring, put his shirt back on. He said, "Well, I guess you got your lesson for the day, huh?" And he left. And he bet the guy $200. They had a bet. So he took the $200
Good
and we
chunk
left.
of money back then.
Yeah, took the 200 and he left. This guy was trying to make a point so he could publicize it for his school. You understand?
Yeah.
His ego ran away with him. He was going to use this to say that he stood in the ring and could go 2 rounds and that was the deal, that he would be able to last 2 rounds with Giardello in a ring. And Joey was a middleweight champion of the world at the time. He took a half step. The guy went right by him, and he hit him with a left hook. Boom. See you later. Took the 200. We went back to the restaurant.
Before we talk about the book and start to wind down here, there's one more subject I kind of want to tackle. And bear with me as I choose my words carefully. I think it would be really easy for someone to listen to the stories you're telling and hear ego in them, but that's not what I hear. I hear confidence. And we talked a little bit about ego before, and ego is a subject that comes up constantly on this show, especially, when we start talking about martial arts and grandmasters and stripes and all of this.
Ego blinds people, It's like somebody said to me one time when I was younger, he said, "Well, you should go get involved with that group over there and get a black belt." I said, "You know what? I was taught by some masters, and Bruce was one of them, said belts are for holding your pants up." Did you hear what I said?
I did. And it's almost becoming a cliche. It almost feels like we're pulling back from rank because in some respects it's become so devalued. And I'm not going to point fingers at anyone or anything, but I think we all know what I'm talking about, that there are schools out there where rank means a lot less than it does in other places. And certainly, the people in the times that you're talking about saying that, not to worry about rank, that's ahead of its time, the way I'm seeing it, but maybe was, just more par for the course. But what I really want you to talk about is this line between ego and confidence. Because I don't know that we've had anyone on the show that has brought this up in this way. And I think you have the opportunity to teach us, to share with us, because I think it would have been a very simple roll of the dice for you, that the way you're telling these stories now today would have been filled with a lot of ego.
Well, I'll give you a good example. The mind over matter. Okay. And mind over matter is pure discipline. And you can't have ego if you're going to control your own destiny. Ego is for children. When I had the operation to remove the tumor in my head, they did it at the Mass General, and they were very advanced. And there was a doctor there, Raymond Schellberg, who couldn't believe that I was a boxer when I went to see him, because the pituitary controls a lot of things in your body, and it controls your growth hormone. And the normal rate of growth hormone out of it is like 10%. Mine was pumping out 150. So the arthritis in my body and stuff, because of the growth hormone, and caused rheumatoid arthritis. And the guy said to me, how can you possibly? So anyway, long story short, so they had this procedure where they bolted you to a machine, and how they got rid of the tumor was a cyclotron proton beam, which was a laser that didn't burn, but it caused an inner explosion of the tumor and knocked it out. And I was one of 1,000 the first time that it did it. I was very fortunate. But I was in the hospital in Mass General for 4 days. They prepared me for the operation, had the operation, and then I was supposed to stay there for another 2 weeks while they evaluated how the growth hormone deteriorated, how my body changed, because you were going to go through a lot of mental changes. And I checked myself out of the hospital and drove down to Baltimore, Maryland, and fought the number two heavyweight Larry Middleton in the world in a 10-round fight, because I had made an obligation to do that. I still had the scabs in my head from where they had bolted this thing to my head. And I trained 2 days for the fight. I went to the gym and loosened up for 2 days, did no sparring, and wound up, I think the fight, we went 9 rounds, and they stopped it because I just ran out of gas. I mean, I shouldn't have been in the ring at all, but I did it because I made an obligation that I would do it. And I handled myself very well for the first 6 rounds. The guy, I had him hurt a few times. I should have knocked him out, but I just couldn't get the push to finish certain things. So I had enough ability to not get hurt. You understand?
Yeah.
I could move, and I made people miss me and stuff. And, but I learned a serious lesson that, so but you do things, and you allow yourself to do things. And when the doctor found out, he said, "Are you out of your mind? You could have got killed. You just had a serious operation in a serious gland in your head, and you're going to take blows to the head? What is wrong with you?" But mind over matter. You know what I mean?
I do. Well, not the way you do, but I have an understanding.
You have to believe in who you are and what you are, and what your abilities are. And can we stretch that? Of course we can. And did I know that I was taking a chance of doing something? Yeah, but I knew I couldn't get hurt all that bad because I knew how to take care of myself. But, it was, it was just one of those things,
Let's talk about this book. You talked a little bit about it, and there's a script, there's a book. I assume there's some overlap in there. But
yeah, the book is called Family Legacy, and if you go to a site called FamilyLegacyTheNovel.com, it takes you right to Amazon where it's at, and it tells the story of it, why I did it, and I wrote the book because it was time for people to understand how a group of people were thrown under the bus. The government just didn't want partners any longer. And when I was a boy, growing up you're a young fella. So but when I was a boy growing up in the cities of Philadelphia, in the streets, children went out and played in the street from sun up to sundown. You never went home. You were always out in the street playing. And there was never a problem. There weren't any drive-by shootings. You could leave a baby pram outside of your house without someone stealing the child. We didn't lock our front doors. Neighborhoods were protected because La Familia, they ran their neighborhoods very well. And it was a different way of life. Today, you wouldn't think of living that way. Understand?
Yeah.
Well, it's like where I live, I don't lock my front door. If somebody comes in my house, they better come to play. That'd be a bad mistake. And the people that run the areas around where I live know that I live there. And I don't bother them, and I don't want them to bother me. So if you want to go rob somebody, rob the guy next door if you want. That's up to you. But if you bring that to my front door, then you're bringing it to the wrong front door.
I can see that. I feel sorry for anyone who breaks into your home.
I'm 70 some years old now, and but life is funny. I just you have to believe in your own self and your own abilities to do certain things to make your life work the way you want it to work. And could I have done 100 other films and different things? Yeah, I could have, but I did what I wanted to do. I chose the ones I wanted to do, and what I did with all of them, I did well. And if you look at the genre of pictures that I did, you'll see that every picture I did, what I did in them, I did well. And that's not ego, that's just the way it, and I've been applauded for everything I've ever done.
I ask every guest to choose how we end our conversation, whether that be some advice or, it could be another story. It could be anything. So how would you want to end our conversation today for the audience?
Life is a never-ending journey. Every day is another day, and it's up to the individual to believe in what you're doing and where you're going, and how much do you believe it? Do you have the ability to be 100% honest with you? Can you look in the mirror? This is a good trick for people. Can you look in the mirror, eyeball to eyeball, to the person in that mirror and say, I really like you today. I like what you're doing. I like where you're going. I like who you are. Not very many people can do that.
I told you this was going to be a great episode, didn't I? And it was. And I know I say that about every episode, and I'm going to continue saying that about every episode, but it's because we get the best guests. We have so much luck. We're fortunate. We're blessed. So, Mr. O'Halloran, thank you for sharing these amazing stories. This is one I'm going to have to go back and listen to a couple more times myself. If you want to see more, if you want to hear more, if you want links and photos and all that, go to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. Check out the notes for this episode 506. Maybe find the transcript and consider supporting our work. You could make a purchase at whistlekick.com, use the code podcast15 to save 15%, or leave a review, buy a book on Amazon, or help out with the Patreon. Patreon.com/whistlekick. And if you see someone out in the wild wearing a Whistlekick shirt, maybe a hat, make sure you say hello. If you have guest suggestions, let us know. And you should be following us on social media at Whistlekick everywhere. My personal email address, jeremy@whistlekick.com. I love hearing from all of you. Keep it up. Until next time, train hard, smile, and have a great day.